We start with breaking news from the International Criminal Court concerning the Israeli-Hamas conflict. The ICC prosecutor says there are reasonable grounds to believe that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu bears criminal responsibility for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The prosecutor therefore says he's seeking an arrest warrant for Mr. Netanyahu. He's also applied for arrest warrants for 3 Hamas leaders. Hamas carried out the October 7 attacks in Israel and is designated a terrorist organisation by many countries. Here is the ICC's chief prosecutor talking about those arrest warrants.
That I have reasonable grounds to believe, on the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023. The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment, willful killing or murder, and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population, as well as crimes against humanity of extermination and or murder, persecution, and allegations of crimes of committing other inhumane acts. It's alleged that these crimes were committed in the context of the ongoing armed conflict and as part of a widespread and systematic attack against the civilian population of Gaza, pursuant to a state policy. My office submits that there are reasonable grounds to believe that these 3 Hamas leaders are criminally responsible for the killing of Israeli civilians in attacks perpetrated by Hamas and other armed groups on the 7th of October 2023, the taking of hostages, and the other crimes alleged in our applications. My office has diligently collected evidence and interviewed survivors and eyewitnesses at the scene of at least 6 major attack locations. The applications rely upon evidence such as CCTV footage, authenticated audio, photographs and video material, expert evidence, and statements by Hamas and the members of other armed groups, including by the alleged perpetrators themselves.
So that's the ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, speaking a little earlier. Let's go to Jerusalem now, where Rebecca Ritters, our correspondent there, is following this story. Welcome, Rebecca. What reaction, if any, from Israel?
Well, there hasn't been any yet from the 2 men involved, Benjamin Netanyahu and the Defence Minister, Yoav Gallant. We have heard from the opposition leader, Yair Lapid, who's called the decision a disaster. And we just recently heard from Benny Gantz, also a member of the War Cabinet, but not in Benjamin Netanyahu's party. He slammed the decision as a crime of historic proportions. Now, that is echoing words that we heard from Benjamin Netanyahu himself last month when it was announced that the ICC may be pursuing this angle. He said in response, if the ICC sought arrest warrants, it would be a scandal of historic proportions. He called it what would be an anti-Semitic hate crime. So you can probably gauge what the response is going to be, and that is certainly the response we're hearing kind of across the board from people in Israel. An unnamed Israeli diplomatic official told the media here that the ICC decision is hypocritical and embarrassing on the international stage. I think that's pretty much what we can expect across the board here, Phil.
So what potential consequences could this announcement have for the Israeli government and more broadly for Mr. Netanyahu?
Well, that's difficult to say. We know that Israel isn't signed up to the ICC. It doesn't recognise it and is therefore not under its jurisdiction. Neither is its staunch ally, the United States. We've seen in the past Vladimir Putin has been issued an arrest warrant, and he still remains, in power in Russia. So there may be little consequences in the immediate, but personally for Benjamin Netanyahu, it will restrict him travelling. I mentioned that Israel and the United States are not signed up to the ICC, but 125 other countries are, and should the Yoav Gallant or Benjamin Netanyahu step foot in one of those countries, they are obligated to arrest them and send them to The Hague effectively. So, it certainly will have ramifications there personally. When you look on the wider scale and the effects on the war, it certainly may cause the US to put more pressure on Israel. It may, when faced with this international pressure, maybe face to put even more pressure on Israel when it comes to humanitarian aid and the way that it's conducting the war in Gaza. But in terms of political ramifications in the immediacy, that remains to be seen, but I certainly don't think it's going to have any major effects on whether or not Benjamin Netanyahu remains Prime Minister.
So if this request from the prosecutor comes to anything, Rebecca, might it actually boost Mr Netanyahu's standing there in Jerusalem politically?
Well, it's true, and it should be stated, Phil, that, of course, a panel of ICC judges still needs to determine whether or not they will go ahead with these arrest warrants, so it isn't final. Whether or not that has a boost is difficult to say. It may have a boost somewhat, but probably by members of society that already agree with Benjamin Netanyahu or that already support Benjamin Netanyahu. It may, in fact, support the protest movement who are anti-Benjamin Netanyahu and anti the way that he's been conducting this war. They're against the way that he's been handling the hostage negotiations and are critical of the government for not doing enough. And it may well bolster that section of society. Whether it has a bolstering of Benjamin Netanyahu is difficult to say, but I don't think that's particularly likely.
OK, thanks for that, Rebecca. Rebecca Ritters in Jerusalem.